Welcome everyone to New South Wales DPI Dairies webinar number 9, the potential benefits of cow activity monitoring for herd health and reproduction. My name is Nicholas Lyons. I am the Development Officer, Robotic Milking Systems within the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries. This is a national role supporting technology adoption on Australian dairy farms with a particular focus but not limited to robotic milking systems. Today we have the great privilege of having an outstanding guest speaker with us. Carl Hockey is a qualified and registered veterinarian with honours and holds a PhD in cattle reproduction, both from the University of Queensland in Australia. Carl completed his doctorate on the topic of automated heat detection in dairy cows and has since conducted a review on the topic for Dairy Australia and published a guide for farmers considering investment in this area. Carl has a great experience offering herd health and reproductive management advice. He is Management Director of Rural Vet, a family-operated business offering custom animal health solutions to a range of livestock animal production industries with a particular focus on intensive dairy cattle enterprises. Carl is passionate about advancing the dairy industry and loves to engage with people from all backgrounds, and he strives to add value in every situation he can. Carl and I met back in 2011 at the Dairy Research Foundation Symposium while I was doing my PhD at Sydney University, and he was a guest speaker to talk on a similar topic to the one today to us. And we have been in touch on and off since then. So when I heard that there was a great interest in this topic, I immediately thought of him as our next guest speaker. Carl accepted our invitation to be the guest speaker with us here today and has kindly volunteered his time to share with us his insights into the potential benefits of cow activity monitoring for herd health and reproduction. The presentation will be mostly focused on practical applications of adopting cow activity monitoring devices. So Carl, thanks again for your time, and the stage is all yours.
Wow, thanks a lot, Nicholas. That's really great to be asked to be here today, and looking forward to hopefully helping a few people understand a little bit more on this topic. So we'll just get my screen up here. And please, as we go along this morning, this afternoon now rather, if there's any questions, then please just use that chat section there and give that to Nico. Will follow that up, and at the end we'll hopefully have some time to address those questions. So just compile them as we go. So this afternoon, just going through the topics that I want to cover. Firstly, I want to talk about heat detection and why it's important. We want to understand a little bit more about these automated heat detection systems and exactly how they work. Want to know how good these systems work, how good they perform, and we're going to go through an example case study, a farm that's a Queensland-based farm that's recently installed these, and look at their performance before and after adding activity collars. We're going to have a bit of a look into the costs versus the benefits using this case study, and then discuss a little bit about what to look for if this is something you're trying to make a decision about purchasing automated heat detection. You're not sure if it's for you. What do you? There's different products on the market. How do I compare them? So we're going to look at what things to consider if you're in the market for them. We're going to have a look into the future of automated animal management systems and where to from here. So we know a bit about what they can do for you now, but there's a whole world evolving of potential applications that as our knowledge increases, we're likely to improve what we can use these for. And then we're going to sum up and have some questions. So first up, why is heat detection important? So if we want to get cows pregnant with AI, there's important thing that we need to coordinate timing of our insemination with an ovulation. So now I'm just struggling to move my screen around, sorry. It's not advancing. Why is that? Here we go. So timing insemination with ovulation. hopefully to get ourselves a pregnancy and result in a calf. Now, traditionally, we've used observation of cows mounting other cows as our means to know that a cow's about to ovulate, but it's not actually, so heat detection has usually been referring to observing a cow showing external signs of heat, but it's ovulation detection that is important to getting cows pregnant, not heat detection. So just wanted to, I guess, change your way of thinking slightly, as previously we focused on how good are things at heat detection, but it's really how good at they at knowing when a cow is going to ovulate. So ovulation detection drives our reproductive performance and is a big contributor to revenue on farm. Our reproductive performance is made up of two main areas, so the submission rate and the conception rate, and both of these are driven by our ovulation detection system. So the proportion of cows that are ovulating that our system detects is going to drive our submission rate, and how accurate it is at knowing when that ovulation is going to occur is going to help us better time insemination and affect our conception rate. So an ovulation detection system has two major parts to it, and both those bits drive reproductive performance and then ultimately our revenue through milk production, which is a whole lot more efficient earlier days in milk, and then our calf outputs as well. So two very important questions when it comes to getting cows pregnant to AI is identifying which cows are about to ovulate and when will that ovulation occur. So those two things driving that submission rate and conception rate, and that's how we judge how good is an automated system. Now, when it comes to detecting cows that are ovulating, so of course the traditional method, looking at cows standing to be mounted by other cows. However, unfortunately, there's evidence that the modern cow is just getting a little bit shy. She's not what she used to be. So the number of times that a cow or the duration of her standing heat is decreasing. There's evidence towards that. There's also evidence that the number of times she's mounted during that period, so the intensity of that is decreased. And when we combine that with, on average, increase in herd sizes, we get a situation where trying to find cows that are ovulating using the traditional visual observation is getting harder and harder. The cows just aren't standing out like they used to, and it makes it more and more difficult. So we need some other solutions, and that's where automated heat detection comes in. So just a little bit about how do automated heat detection systems work. So essentially, to understand automated heat detection, it's good to know a bit about what happens to a cow around the time of heat or around ovulation. And there's a whole range of changes that take place. Some of these are behavioural changes, such as the standing to be mounted, or increased walking activity, a little bit of fighting, headbutting, restlessness, hanging out in sexually active groups. There's those sort of behavioural things, reduced feed intake. There's also then physiological changes that occur, such as the estrogen levels going up, progesterone levels going down, changes in the mucus being produced, the electrical conductivity of the vagina changes due to increased fluid in the tissue. So there's reddening of the vulva. There's a whole range of changes that occur. Pheromones are released that can be detected by other animals, and there's even devices designed to try and detect those things. So with all these changes taking place, all that automated heat detection systems aim to do is try and monitor one or multiple of these parameters, and how well it monitors it, and then how closely those changes relate to a cow's ovulation, how consistent they are, and the timing relationship determines how good that automated system is. So there's a whole bunch of different products that have been, I guess, developed but attempted to be commercialized. Some of them have been commercialized, others have not been very practical and haven't gone much past research. So everything from vaginal sensors that detect changes in tissue fluid, herd navigators, a system DeLaval has that can monitor milk progesterone directly from an inline milk monitoring system. There's a whole range of heat mount detectors that work off pressure systems, so they're just detecting the standing behaviour. And then more commonly, and sort of what's, I guess, led the way in the last 10, 15 years has now more recently come out on top, is these activity meters. And there's a range of them, some combining rumination and or temperature monitoring. So whole bunch of stuff out there, and they all vary in their costs, they vary in their logistics involved with using them, and they vary in their ability to be able to know which cows are ovulating and when those ovulations will occur. So when it comes to activity monitoring, which has become sort of the market leader, basically because of just the accuracy and the logistics and practicality of it, looking back into the history of it, it was as early as in the 1950s. Research was done with mechanical pedometers, just looking at the number of steps cows take throughout their estrus cycle and showing that it increases around the time of ovulation. So cows have a marked increase in activity around that time. So this knowledge about these changes in cows is nothing new. It's been around for a very long time, but it's only been as technology's advanced that we've found practical ways to utilise this and use them, commercialise it into a useful system. Obviously, if you're having to try and get down low and look at this device on the cow, there'd be a few OH&S risks of getting kicked in the head. So definitely electronics has really made a big difference to our ability to use this. So understanding a bit of the evolution though from where it was in the past to where it is now. So the earliest sort of mechanical pedometers, I guess, is just a count of movements. Any movement that sort of had a force critical enough to make a single count just kept stepping up, and it's every time you look at the system you can take the difference of the current count from your previous time, and you know how many steps during that period. Some of the earliest commercialized devices of that sort of through the 80s, 90s, an example, Westphalia had the res counter, and each time the cow came into the dairy, you could download through close range interrogation. They would download the number of steps since she was last milked, and this was useful, and we'd end up with 2 numbers a day, and those numbers just were a total count. We had no idea whether all that activity occurred quickly in the morning and then not much later, or whether it was evenly spread out. So there was a lot of limited application. Then the Res Counter 2 came on hand, and that broke up that count into 2-hour blocks. So still just a basic a movement that, you know, sometimes these were mercury switches or a ball inside a little chamber, and as it went from one side to the other, that made a count electronically. So all we had was a total count of steps or movements throughout different time periods. So, but breaking it up into 2-hour blocks then was able to let us know. The information was only downloaded at milking, but you could know then back from between then and the previous milking, every 2-hour block of activity, and that way we were able to pinpoint exactly when the heat began and know when we're likely to need to inseminate her. But moving on from that, we've now come to devices where nearly pretty much every activity meter on the market now uses 3-dimensional accelerometer technology. So we're talking knowing the movement in 3 different planes, so in X, Y, Z planes. So we know whether it's going up, down, sideways, or back to front. And we don't just know the direction of the movement, it's actually measuring the force. So previously we just had a count if there was a force big enough to make a count. Now we know the acceleration and the direction, and we don't just know this in 2-hour blocks. These things are interrogating multiple times per second to get these accelerations, and then usually compiling that into 15-minute blocks. So our amount of data is just gone staggering from just a total count from the last day into 2-hour blocks to now. We know the movement and direction of everything. So now a lot of that data is, we're still trying to catch up as to what we can do with it. So understanding a bit more how these systems work. Essentially there's a sensor, and we just talked about how most of them now are these XYZ accelerometers. That sensor then is continually monitoring the movement on the cow, and that's transferred somehow. And this is where they start to vary from system to system, is the data transfer. So some of the, I guess, more capable systems now on the market is reaching over 1 kilometre in transfer from that cow. And that makes different practical applications better. So we can get information now from dry cows or springers or heifers. So animals that are not coming near the dairy, we now can make it practical to monitor them as well. And that information then usually gets sent somewhere to be analysed. Some of those systems send it straight from the receiver to the cloud, so they use some sort of like a 4G data, cellular data transfer, or else they might connect through a Wi-Fi locally on your farm. But either way, they'll either go up to the cloud and it's all managed there, and then you can access them from any device, or else you might find they go back to a computer that's fixed on farm, and that makes a big difference to the practical applications too, if you have to have a computer that's got local software on it versus ones that go through the cloud. But nonetheless, the data that is detected gets sent through and analysed through some sort of application program. It still relies on the farmer to at least observe these systems, so whether it be through your phone or a computer, and make a decision and take action. So one of the biggest sort of messages of today is that these systems, although we use the word automated, they're really just a tool, and at the end of the day, what you get out of them is really how you use them. They're not a solution in themselves. They're just a tool to help you out. So understanding now how well do these systems perform, particularly in local Australian systems, and that's what my PhD was on. It's just getting a little bit old now, but still quite relevant. So the two questions that I aimed to answer when I was looking into this is who's ovulating and when will they ovulate? So how good is these systems for knowing the answers to these two questions? And here's an example of some data I collected in my research, and that was using the ResCounter 2, which is being superseded now, but very good at that time. So the ResCounter 2 activity meter was giving us the data in 2-hour blocks. So all those little squiggly lines you see up there top, we've got a whole 21 days worth of them. So collecting 12 data points each day, and over a 21-day period, you see two lovely clean spikes around the time of heat. And then down the bottom, we've expanded this last heat out so you can see it a bit closer. So the things I was looking for was collecting the activity data and looking for the onset of activity, and I was relating that back to when the farmer chose to AI the cow, and I was also monitoring them by ultrasound multiple times a day to detect when they ovulated, and trying to see the relationship between these increases in activity and when ovulation occurred. What we found is that more than 90% of ovulating cows showed an associated increase in activity. So that gives you a detection rate of at least 90%, which compared to other methods, which just your standard observation, visual observation, can be reported as low as 50% or more. So that's doing very adequate. And when it comes to knowing how well they could detect when the cow's going to ovulate or predict ovulation time? Well, more than 75% of the ovulations occurred within a 16-hour window relative to when onset of activity occurred, and we had more than 90% over a 32-hour period, which that gives you plenty of time and a tight enough window for average conventional semen should last that duration and achieve reasonable conception rates. And we actually did relate timing of AI to onset of heat, and it was a very strong relationship with conception rate. So what we found from that is that cow activity monitoring could tell you who's ovulating, and it was able to tell you when they were ovulating. So more conclusions from that study is that cow activity monitoring it can be used to detect a high proportion of your ovulating cows in paddock-based dairy herds, and that's particularly what I was trying to look at, is paddock-based situations, because most of the data before then had just been done in housed cattle in either Europe or America. Cow activity can provide a useful indication of when ovulation is likely to occur, and the interval from the AI to ovulation, as well as the interval from onset of activity to AI, was associated with significant differences in conception rates. So it means it's good to tell you when to inseminate. So therefore, cow activity is useful to detect which cows are about to ovulate and knowing the best time for insemination for a maximum chance of conception. And that's the main things that matters when it comes to getting cows pregnant to AI, is those two things, as it's driving submission rate and conception rate. So it got a pretty good tick from me in that regard. But how does it actually go in the real situation? So here's a case study that I put together, which is a family-operated farm up on the Darling Downs. They've got 250 Friesian cows. They run a pasture plus a PMR, so pasture with a mixed ration. They're a year-round calving herd, and they installed activity collars on all of their cows in November 2015. So when I put this together, I was doing it at the end of last year for another talk. I was then comparing, it was right on November 2016, so I was able to get a whole 12 months worth of information before and after these collars. So milk production at that time, that when they put these collars on, so back in November 2015, was averaging 26 litres per cow per day. So what I did is this herd used collected data in Easy Dairy and had good records, and I was able to use the Easy Dairy to export a fertility focus report, which is the standard in-calf Australian standardised report for year-round herds. And I did a report over the whole 12-month period before installation of activity meters, and then I ran another one for the 12-month period ending November 16 after they'd had the collars on for 12 months. So summarising the findings we got from that, which were, I must say, a lot better than I had thought. I've got faith in these systems, but it was the first time I was actually able to get decent data, as most other herds I've dealt with didn't have very good recording prior to the activity meters. So they usually had gone from a system that didn't have any recording to then a system that did. And although they showed that the activity meters were useful, I didn't have anything to compare it from beforehand. So this was quite exciting in that regard. So the 100-day in-calf rate, which if you're not familiar with, is basically a measure of the proportion of all cows that get pregnant within the first 100 days post-calving. And in the 12 months before installation of activity meters, he had a 37% in-calf rate. Now our target for industry is 58%, and which being an advisor in southeast Queensland, I'm not sure how you go in New South Wales. I haven't found too many herds that are getting close to these targets. They were set quite a while ago, these targets, and I think if you get them, you're doing extremely well. So 12 months after, he got 58% 100-day in-calf rate. So brought from about a 1 star on the report up to a full 5 star. The 80-day submission rate, that's basically the proportion of animals that have had at least one insemination by 80 days after calving, and totally driven by your heat detection performance. Previously running at 44%, and since installing the system, running at 79%. So with the target, industry targets were set at 73% back when the in-calf study was done. So an excellent result there. The mature cow 80-day submission rate. Now that's pretty much the same measure as above, but we only look at the mature cows. And the reason why we split them up is because it may be that it's not our heat detection that's giving us a poor result. It could be that the cows are not cycling. And the odds are that mature cows are cycling. It's usually the younger animals that might be having difficulty cycling after their first calving. So virtually no difference there. So the improvements were basically a heat detection related issue, not because of cows not cycling. And then we look at the return intervals. 18 to 24 day returns gives us an idea of what proportion of all heat intervals between heats were within a normal heat cycle. And previously 46%, and after including these activity meters, he was up to 61%. So massive improvements in all those measurements that relate to heat detection, and also pregnancy rates. Further to that, the average days in milk, we're talking previously was running at about 230 days in milk in November 15, and at the time of looking at this in November 16, the average days in milk was 149. So a massive change there in the days in milk. That change is not going to persist, as he was obviously running a very stale herd, and after putting these devices in, got a lot of animals pregnant quickly, and so that's bringing that average days down below what will probably be the new average. But when we looked at the average calving interval, so I extrapolated those pregnancies that had occurred within that 12 months, most of them not calved yet, that gives us a better idea on what sort of days in milk change will be. So the average calving interval there was changed by about 25 days, so gone from 410 down to 385, which was estimated because it was prior to them calving again. So that improvement alone is worth a lot of money, and is really shown in the average daily milk production. So same time of year, November can be quite warm, and not necessarily the best months for milk production, but 26 litres in November 15, and he was averaging 31 litres. Obviously that's the days in milk change there in November 16, so no major other changes in his herd, the same diets, same time of year. But so all round, he was a very, very happy customer, and he's very glad that he's gone ahead with this. Not everybody's always extremely that happy, but this was a great example. So in this case, what are the costs versus the benefits? So the cost, 250 collars. He installed 2 long-range antennas, so he was running these antennas that sort of give you up to a kilometre range. Software installation, essentially he spent about $70,000, and which worked out about $280 a cow. So the collars themselves, I think, were around $150, $180 there, and by the time you had the antennas and the installation, the hardware you need, that's where you get that about $280. So those numbers might have changed since then. This is only about a year ago, so it's not, oh sorry, less than, 18 months ago now when he installed these. So using the in-calf economic model, the benefits in this herd are likely to be somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000 a year, and that depended on whether I was using the 100-day changes in 100-day in-calf rate, or I was looking at data of changes in days in milk, or so sort of looking between different ways you could look at the economic benefits. you're going to get somewhere in $20,000 to $50,000 a year benefits using this improvement. That's going to be equal to about $80 to $200 per cow per year. And now the collars are expected to last somewhere around 7 to 10 years. And what we find is at that $80 to $200 per cow a year, we're getting a total payback time of around 2 to 3 years. So in some cases, possibly even shorter, but that's fairly conservative, 2 to 3 years payback time, which is in line with what I've seen lots of people do other case studies that I haven't been involved with, and that's the same sort of claims you get, somewhere around that 2 to 3 year period. So using this herd as an example, the cost was $280 per cow. That is about a 7 to 10 year period benefit. The benefit's about $80 to $200 per cow per year through that period that device is working. Now, without doing fancy economic models, just a straight line return on investment, we're looking around 30 to 75% per annum. So now this isn't including any labour savings or lifestyle benefits, and particularly in this herd, this farmer really enjoyed the system, and so I think that helps motivate you. And part of those improvements will not just be that the improvement in heat detection, it's the motivation that the farmer's got now to go out and make reproduction a bit of a priority, and I'm sure that factors into some of this benefit. It doesn't include the health and nutrition benefits, which we're going to talk about soon too, about some of the other uses of these activity monitors, not just for detecting cows ready for AI. So if you're thinking about purchasing an automated heat detection system, what are some of the things you need to look for? So we'll address this. So one of the first things is that method of data transfer from the cow to receiver. And as I mentioned earlier, if you need, some of these require close range transfer, so the cow actually has to come into the milking parlour in order to, I sound like an American now, the milking parlour, we can just call it the milking shed. The cow comes into the milking shed, and if it's close range, then we don't get that information from her until she's been milked. And that means we need all of the cows in the herd to be milked before we know everything about the herd as a whole, which can limit if you're trying to compare data from a cow across her herd mates, which isn't always necessary, but that's something that can be part of a calculation, which is not really practical if it's a really close data transfer system. You then get sort of intermediate data transfer lengths, which might be that you put it in the holding yard while they're waiting to be milked, and so once all the cows are brought up, it might be a 50 to 100 metre range, then immediately all the data is transferred before milking begins. So that opens up the applications a fair bit more. But when we come to long range data transfer, we've got like up to 1 kilometre, that then all of a sudden opens up applications such as springer paddocks, where we might be able to predict that a cow's going to calve. We can use it in heifers, so mating heifers, 15 months old heifers, getting them in calf using these. Any animal that's not coming in to be milked essentially could then have these monitors on them if you've got a long range receiver. So that's one area to consider. That is a bit of a for and against. Battery life, these devices, pretty much the life of the battery is the life of the device. So as soon as the battery's gone, that's it, throw away the product. So getting a bit of information on how long they're going to last. Warranties can differ markedly from company to company, so make sure you discuss that when you're getting something like this offered to you and you're going through this with your rep. Learn about what warranties are offered, how they work, and compare them. Ease of attaching and removing devices. Now this doesn't sound like much, but it's actually a really important thing, and particularly in herds that want to, save their initial capital outlay by not purchasing collars for every single animal, and they sort of start off with the hope to be moving collars from one animal to the other once they get pregnant, but you very quickly find that that putting on these devices trying to take them off a cow and put them on another can be really quite, I guess, time consuming, or even just the OH&S involved. So have a look at the way they attach and detach, and also making sure they're not going to fall off the animals. In general, there's not usually issues of activity meters coming off animals, but the actual trying to get the collar off and back on again can be painful in some cases. So neck, leg or ear mounted, so there's a whole range of devices out there now that can make a difference to the practical applications of putting them on, and also just the environment where they're in. Is it suited to them? Are they likely to get irritate the animal in that location, or is it going to get covered in mud or get ripped out? Durability and reliability, obviously there's going to be variations there. Now, user interface, I think this one's quite important. So you've got some systems that all the information goes to the cloud first, and then you can access that pretty much with any internet connected device. So iPads, iPhones, any smart phone or computers. I find that's going to be a whole lot easier to some degree. I had a system that I trialed that required a computer to be present on farm, and that farm only had one computer, and when he took the laptop home at night, we couldn't download the data, and so there was missing data. So just understanding a bit more of the systems involved for it to communicate back to a base, and how that data is stored, and then how you interact with that. So some might allow you to view data on any internet device, but you can't then make active changes. So you might want to, say, talk to your drafting system, those sorts of things. So the other things, looking at additional features, so are there cow health parameters? So some of the systems now, there's a whole range of cow health, rumination, nutrition that are more about the application modules. So the device itself is detecting the exact same movements on the cow, but it's only various features that they'll turn on depending what you pay for. So it's in the either the cloud or the software, they'll turn on this feature so you can look at the cow health, or you can look at the rumination. So those are things you want to consider. Is it an ongoing cost that you have to pay to have access to that? Is it a once-off expense? So a little bit of thinking about that and talking to your rep when you're comparing different products. What options there are for optimizing the algorithms. So some are fixed, and the algorithm that comes with them from the company is the way it is. Others might be sort of self-intuitive, and they start looking back through cows that got pregnant and then trying to they self-optimize. Others you can manually then adjust some of them, make it more sensitive, less sensitive, to so that you get it working just right for your herd. These are never a set and forget thing. You don't just plug and play. There's a period of time where you need some training and making sure that it's working right for your herd. And I think that's where in the earlier days, when we were sort of getting a bit more hit and miss, where some farmers were really happy and others were having bad experiences, really come back to what support they were getting to try and make the system work right for them, because just the optimal algorithms in one herd might not be the same in another. And really important is what sort of integration it might have with your current setup. So if you're running Easy Dairy or Dairy Plan or any other sort of system, will you have to upgrade? Can you integrate with it already? How's it going to integrate with the drafting gate? How can you communicate with it at milking time? What screens come up in the dairy, or is there something shows up on the milk meter? That sort of thing. What's the practical integration with stuff that you've already built up? Certain parts of your dairy communicating with each other. How does this work with what you've already spent money on, and also for your herd management software? And also technical backup and support, which is so important. Is this company just going to sell you the product and walk away, or are they going to help you out? And like I said earlier, some of those you really need to spend a bit of time when you first set these things up, getting it working, functioning optimally, and looking at it closely to see whether you need to tweak some certain things. And if you haven't got the backup and support that you need, then you're not going to get your money's worth out of this. So make sure you've got really good trust in the company you're dealing with, and talk through them, what's included, what's not included when it comes to ongoing support. And finally, and very importantly on this, automated heat detection is a tool. It's not a reproductive management plan. So like any tool, when it comes to building a house, a hammer doesn't build a house for you, but it sure is helpful to have a good quality hammer if you are building a house. So in this case, heat detection is a brilliant reproductive tool, but it needs to be part of a greater reproductive management plan. So talking with your advisor, if you've got an in-calf advisor locally, your vet, whoever else might be helping support you in your reproductive management, you still need to work with these as just one part of your overall plan. They're not a solution in themselves. Now, looking through to the future, which is really exciting, is where to with automated animal management systems. So essentially, things are starting to move from just heat detection devices to herd health and nutrition management. And we'll look at that in a bit more detail. So monitoring cows' behaviours such as the walking, feeding and grazing, resting time, rumination, getting health alerts. So health alerts giving us real early detection of significant health events. So these devices can often pick up a sick cow long before we see anything really visually. So I'll give you some examples of these soon. But for example, calving, ketosis, mastitis, lameness, these are things that we might be starting to use. Some of them we already are, and others with more research we'll get more and more information on. So here's an example here. This is the cow manager, and it's got a whole range of different parameters here it's showing. So this is rumination, eating, time active, time not active, high activity time, and then they've got this thing called a feed factor. Now, this is an individual cow around the time of calving, so you can see how all these different parameters, some are going up, some are going down, and it was a real clear change relating to the reproductive event of calving. So these devices, may be getting better and better at being able to alert us that a cow is calving. This is a great example here using the moo monitor, and we're comparing animals on the right. We've got here a graph with all these little triangles, and down the bottom is the rumination plus feeding time in minutes per day. So the more we are to the right, the more time we're spending feeding and ruminating. And on the left axis, the vertical axis, we've got resting time. So the higher we are, the more time resting, and the lower we are, the less time. So the more we are down to the bottom right corner, we're eating a lot more and we're not resting a lot. Now you can see the little tiny red triangle in the middle there. I wonder if I can bring up a pointer. Where are we? Arrow. So here we go. So you can see this little red dot here. So this cow and all the others are her herd mates. Doesn't stand out from the cows in terms of, you think her rumination feeding time and her resting time, it's about halfway between the highest and the lowest. But she got an alert, a health alert on this day. So we're going to go through the next. Now, here we go. What do we do? How do we get out of that? I've got to progress through this. Here we go. So then on the next day, you can see that that it's moved. Oh dear, get the arrow. There we go. She's moved up here, and then a day later, all you got to do, here we go, a day later she's up there. So we go back. So this day we got an alert. Next day we're starting to see more resting, less eating. And then on the third day we're just resting and not eating at all. So by the third day you're going to see this cow. She's going to be out in the paddock by herself, lying down, not doing anything, while everybody else is up walking and eating. She's lying around doing nothing. So, but rather than waiting till then to see it, this computer-generated information has compared her own activity against herself, against her herd mates, and told you on this day that she's sick. Otherwise, it's going to take you 3 days to see she's sick yourself. So I hope that makes sense for you. A bit hard to show through in this. So nutrition is another whole area where we're likely to get a whole lot of improvements using activity monitoring. So comparing whole group and individual animal feeding behaviours, understanding individual cow grazing and behaviour and feeding efficiencies, combining feeding behaviour data with changes in body weight and milk production. So over time we might be able to know a bit more about every single cow's individual feeding patterns, relate that back to body weight. So already our automated milking systems are weighing animals every time they come into the robots, looking at individual milk production, balancing that with external feeding behaviours. And this might allow us in future for greater individual cow management in things such as differential feeding of individuals, better genetic selection for feed efficiency. So we might be able to in future look at just what sort of feeding behaviour a cow has had and relate that back to her productivity, and that might tell us, looking at that phenotype might give us an idea that there's a certain genotype worth selecting for. So pasture management and adjustments to individual and group feeding formulation. So we might be able to use these to manage our pasture grazing, and then adjust the individual supplements to that pasture grazing based on information from these collars. So many options and possibilities, and all this is really in its infancy. So feed factor is another example here from the cow manager, where feed factor is a combination of rumination, eating and non-active, all combined together, and this is looking at it across the whole herd. And you see there paddock 21, so the cows were moved into a certain paddock, and that black line, you can see it went up, and then they moved out of that paddock into paddock 5, and that line goes down. So we're learning information about the way that the animals are grazing and their rumination and eating patterns based on monitoring activity from a collar on a cow. So it's just incredible now. We know how much time they're spending ruminating, we know how much time they're lying, how much time they're walking, how much time they're feeding, all just by having an XYZ accelerometer around their neck. And this is a table or a graph I really love. It shows here, so all these things that we just saw that now these days are being sent in real time through the cloud, and being able to access anywhere in the world on your smartphone. Back in 1975, you see this was done. Some poor PhD student would have painstakingly sat up all night watching cows in paddocks and recording every one of those dots as a data point to get the resting, eating and walking pattern over before and after estrus. So information that we knew was useful many years ago but completely impractical, now we can collect with complete ease and create all sorts of monitoring reports and alerts just by having a quick look at our phone. So things have changed, and I think now the technology is caught up with the science, but I think we've come to a point now where the science needs to catch up with the technology, and that's where that the future of activity monitoring will be. So summing up today, automated activity meter systems are capable of detecting a high proportion of cows that are about to ovulate, and they provide a useful indication of when the ovulation will occur. and hence the best time for insemination. Activity meter systems have been demonstrated in real herds to provide substantial improvements in reproductive performance, and hence they can provide a significant return on investment. When investing in this kind of technology, it's really important to do your homework, as not all systems operate exactly the same or provide the same functionality. And at the end of the day, this is just technology and it's just a tool. The outcome achieved in your herd will depend on how you use it. And lastly, our ability to use activity meter systems for non-heat detection purposes, such as health monitoring and nutrition management, is likely to continue to improve as further research is conducted in this area. Finally, I just want to thank and acknowledge Dairy Australia for the funding that they put into some of the research behind this, and also development of a user guide, and those guides could be useful to you. They complement a lot of what we talked about today, and they're downloadable from the Dairy Australia website. Also, GEA from Westphalia, when I was doing my research, helped a lot in kind with my research, so I'd like to thank them, and the University of Queensland, who supported my research. So now we have time for questions, Nico, if you've got any.
Yep. Thank you, Carl, very much for that. I think it was a fantastic presentation. I certainly learned a lot. And I wanted to point out, as you said, that in Dairy Australia's website, there is a technology section that has this technology and other technologies like cup removers, robots, pasture monitors, conductivity monitors that can help farmers or service providers gain a lot of information. And yes, there has been some questions come through. One is, how long has it taken farmers to achieve good results with these type of systems in general?
Well, essentially, once you start put the collars on, they only take probably a week until they calibrate, a baseline for that animal, and all of a sudden you're getting the benefits of that improved heat detection and health monitoring immediately. It's just the time it takes for then that to make a difference to your whole herd is the time it's going to flow through to your bottom line, but instantly you're going to get improved heat detection. If you're coming off a low base, that is. If you've already got really good heat detection, this can't make it any better if you're already getting the top result. But so in this case, that was 12 months, and the days in milk and the milk production had improved dramatically. So that obviously was coming before the end of that 12 months, but it was another, I think it was a 5 litres of milk improvement, and yeah, about a 25 days improvement in calving interval, and I think it was about 40 or 50 days in milk difference.
Excellent. The other question, Carl, was, and I think you pointed it out just now, do you recommend these type of systems for farmers that have a very poor heat detection, or compared to farmers that are already having a good heat detection, or when working with farmers you tend to solve management issues even for those that have low heat detection? You understand the question? The question was, to what type of farmers would you recommend? Is it the low or high, the ones that have low or high heat detection now at the moment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It sort of has got a couple of different parts to it. The economic benefits of coming off a low base is going to be much greater. So those who have got already poor performance have a greater potential for this to add value to them and get a return. However, those with very poor performance need to look at why they're getting that poor performance, and will this solve all those problems? If that issue is just because they find it very hard to heat detect, and that's the only thing, well, this can probably add a lot of value. But if in general there's other management issues to look at, your conception rates are poor because of semen handling, or cow comfort is poor, and so cows are they're not showing heat, and also they're not getting their fertility is lower. These sorts of things. Well, we need to look at the whole herd as a whole, and in general, herds that are doing well will tend to continue to do well, and herds that are doing poor, they might need more than just a management a technology tool. They still need to address whatever underlying management issues they have. So a bit of both ways. So the lower basic income, more money, but you could have other problems.
Excellent. There's another question come through is, do you suggest using activity meters as the sole heat detection method, or should you use it in conjunction with other methods such as visual observation? I think you've commented some of this, but maybe specifically to answer this question.
Yeah, I think initially you use everything you can. You always continue to look at the animals, but once you build trust in the system, I think you'll find that in many cases it's going to be detecting the cows for you. But what we didn't talk about is the error rate. So that's when the system might say that a cow's on heat, but really she isn't on heat. And that's where using your own observations most comes in, and combining that. If you say that the device finds 10 cows for you today and says these 10 cows are on heat, you should AI her. The truth might be that 8 of them are truly on heat and 2 are false positives. If you look at the cows yourself, you'll usually be able to pull those other 2 out because of your knowledge about those animals. So you look at the graphs and you see how many days since she last was on the heat. You look at the cow. Does she look like she's got roughened, coat, or is there some rub marks on her? Is she got a swollen vulva? Whatever it might be, you use all this combined, and that's going to give you the most accurate end result.
Excellent, Carl. I think there's no more questions coming through. So once again, I want to really thank you for your time and the insights into this presentation. I think they've been fantastic. Definitely you're a qualified speaker to speak on the topic. You have a lot of the theory, but also the practice behind it. And I'm sure there will be more questions coming through, or more people checking those fact sheets on Dairy Australia's website. So once again, thank you a lot for your time, and it's been a pleasure for us.
Thanks a lot, Nico.
So as with all our webinars, this webinar has been recorded and will become available on the New South Wales DPI Dairy website. We also have a New South Wales DPI Dairy Facebook page, which is followed by more than 800 people from all around the world, and a newsletter which is sent out regularly to more than 450 subscribers. The next edition coming out tomorrow. So there's still time to subscribe. You can access the link on the Facebook page. So feel free to join these initiatives to stay updated with all the work we do in the areas of precision dairy farming, like this webinar. So for more information, I would encourage you to visit the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries website, where you will be able to access tools and resources about the dairy industry. There's a specific section in there on robotic milking systems, which includes a lot of information, not only on robotic milking, but also on precision dairy farming, and the link is on the screen at the moment. So once again, thank you all very much for joining today, and I hope to see you all next time.